Alright guys, what we're going to do now is begin to wrap this section here. As you can probably tell, there's a little bit of probably dash protectant or armor oil or something on this dash which needs to be cleaned off. If you're going to use a wax and grease remover, what's going to happen with a lot of dash protectants is it's going to turn hazy and sort of see white streaks. So don't stress too much about that, because what you can do, the wax and grease actually removes it and just leaves a white residue. You can grab some detergent, spray it down and then wipe it all off. If the haziness is still there after you've done that, then obviously reapply the dash and it should bring back to its normal self. That being said, with dash protectants on there, you want to just be careful that the film doesn't touch any of it. If it does touch, then it will not stick. So what I like to do is, in your tucking tool set, grab your red tucking tool with a microfiber, spray the microfiber with a cleaning agent, and then really get into this crevice and clean the bottom section to make sure that any dash protectant or liquids that have been sort of trapped under there are removed. The same thing goes to the top and also on this back side here. Now what you can do to make your life a little bit easier is you can pull this up a little bit to get any sort of dirt and debris in that section, or grab your red tucking tool again, wedge it in between the leather here, and that should pop that one open. Once that's popped open, then you can clean this corner. It is essential that you do that because we are going to be adding a little bit of heat here to pull the vinyl that way. So in saying that, if it does not stick, then you're going to have a tough time getting it to sit nicely. So I cannot express enough how clean this area has to be, because we cannot take it off. It needs to be wrapped on the car, but don't stress, your kit is shaped to the rough measurement with only about 3 or 4 mil on either side, just in case you need to maneuver it or there's different tension everywhere else. You might want to also note that cleaning in here is beneficial, just to remove any of that built up residue that you might find. I also like to wear gloves on this, because after you've done cleaning it and then you've still got it on your fingers and you're starting to touch everything, you're just reapplying all the dash protectant everywhere. So I've gone ahead and soaked my microfiber in wax and grease remover first. Just going to apply it to the surface, really apply it up above, down below, and just try to get as much of that armor oil or whatever's on there off. Wait for my camera to focus, apologies. So what we're going to do is find a wet patch in our microfiber, put our tucking tool in there, flip it over so you have a nice area to wedge in and under. And as you might tell already, all that white hazing is starting to come up. No issue, don't be stressed. This is just the wax and grease remover having a reaction with your dash protectants, and it's just causing all that residue to turn white. Again, you can remove it with detergent, or after you're done with the installation, just reapply your dash protectant. So what the consistency you want to find is with your finger or with a glove on, is a bit of friction, so like sort of pulling in a sense. That's how clean you want it. You don't want it to sort of drag and slide, because that means there's still wax on there. So we're going to target this bottom section first, really get underneath it, Move your tucking tool to a new spot. And then target the top. And again, as I said before, we'll grab this back section here. We'll pull it out a little bit until we hear one click. Don't pull too far because, yeah, you might snap something. And really get the back, under the side, and then the top. And the same applies for this front section here. So this one, again, just grab your tucking tool. I try to use the red one because it's a little bit more forgiving. The black one is quite stiff, which might run the risk of actually damaging your trim piece here if done incorrectly. So just wedge it there until it pushes all the way through, and then you'll be able to just hold it out there and it will stay. So really want to focus on getting this nice and clean, and especially in there as well. So as you could probably tell the difference here, no protectant, protectant. So that's how you want it, and that's sort of not, it's sort of grabbing my gloves here. And you can tell it needs to be a little bit more cleaner there, and make sure it's all done. So once you've got this section all cleaned, you want to make sure there's no debris or any dust particles floating about that might get underneath the wrap. So what we're going to do is just put this section back in, give it a bit of a wipe. Make sure it's nice and clean. So in your kit you're going to receive two dash pieces. One as a spare, just in case you stuff up the first one. This is a little bit tricky to do it on the car, but it saves you a lot of time trying to remove it, which I've done too many interiors. I still do not need to remove this piece. Okay, so this piece isn't part of the kit. This is just a longer piece for me, but the same principles apply. Once you get everything ready, what you're going to do, you're just going to place a section, give yourself enough room around here so that way you can tuck around this back edge. So you're going to angle the piece there. What you're going to do is try to follow the top line. That way it gives you the extra couple of mil to be able to tuck it in later. So I'm going to show you a couple of issues that you might find if not done correctly, and this is how it's going to happen. So if I'm just laying the piece in here, following the top line, like so. Okay, so if you have any wrinkles going this way, which means that by the time when you come to tuck everything down, you can use a blue tucking tool or a red one. Try to avoid the black one because it will not curve into the contour, and what's going to happen is just going to leave gaps. Okay, so this is not what not to do in the event that it does happen. So as you can sort of see the wrinkling down here, it's going vertically. What that means is basically you need to add more tension that way. So the film's bunching up. So essentially once you install it, you want to add a little bit of tension to relieve that as you come to the bottom. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Just sort of like colouring it in, starting from the top and pushing down all the way through, just lifting up this bottom section here. Now I've laid this piece relatively flat with minimal tension, and it's actually enjoying being sat down. Okay, so you want to add a little bit of tension that way as you're sort of guiding it, and you want to feed it around. When you get to this section here, you want to release the tension and just make sure it stays flat. If you're adding too much tension that way towards the end, what's going to happen, it's just going to pull back from this back section here. So as I've laid that flat, I'm just going to cut all this excess off, my apologies. So again, your kit should have enough to cover here, follow through and give you a little bit of excess on that other side to still sort of maneuver it and lift it up. So again, back to the tucking tool, what you want to do is just lift the bottom section and just push down, like what I would like to call colouring in. So it's about getting this piece as flat as possible with minimal tension. Now, if you do have that wrinkling like we're seeing here, all you can do is just lift up very lightly, try not to stretch the film, and just pull it this way a little bit, and then just lay the top down following that top line, and that should relieve all that little tension for you to then colour it in from top to bottom. Okay, so then what we're going to do is just make sure that we have a nice clean edge down the bottom here. So we want to get rid of all this by just lifting up the bottom bit and pushing down towards the dash. And by doing that, you're just going to remove all the little imperfections and crease marks there. So you want to aim it on the 45 and just sort of feed it down underneath. Okay, once that's done, pretty happy with that. Then what you're going to do is just grab your tucking tool and just relieve everything on the top here. So that way when you're pushing it in, it's not stretching, it's sort of just being fed into that top section. And what you want to do is, on a different 45 angle, push it in and just get it all tucked in there. Okay, if you've done it nicely and you've only got a little bit sort of overhang on the top here, what you can do is just push it all in underneath, which will lock it in on the top there. That way you don't need to have or do any extra cuts. So it is recommended to do this with the red one, as the blue one's quite flexible. It might not give you that added sort of push that you need. And while using textured films, if you've ordered a textured one, following that line gives you a nice curve and follow through. So what you don't want to do is go too high and then bring it back down, because that's just going to distort the film into a weird sort of pattern. Also recommended, don't do this out in the sunlight. You want to be in an undercover area and the surface needs to be cool to touch, because if it is warm, what you're going to find is it's going to activate the adhesive, and when you try to readjust it, it's actually going to distort the pattern. If it does do that, again, you've got your spare piece, so you get two pieces in the kit. One you can practice on, and if down the track, if it fails due to the surface not being cleaned properly, or you've overstretched it somewhere, you've still got that second piece available. Okay, so that's included in all the kits, and the same goes to that little piece on the other side, because that is quite tricky to get done. But again, you've got it as a safeguard. Okay, so once that's all tucked in, what you're going to do next is the importance of your blade that's provided in the kit. You want to make sure that you have a fresh blade tip. So snap a blade off, make sure you have a fresh tip there. Make sure you have a clean sort of line to work with. We're going to go on a 45 here. I'm not pressing down too heavy, so I do not want to cut into the dash. And we're just going to trim all the excess off here. So basically, if it's on that 45, it's not going to kick up on you where it's going to damage the film, and it's not going to go down where it's just going to damage the dash. So I'm not adding too much pressure here. With a fresh blade, it just removes that need to apply pressure. And the blade, I'm just letting it do all the work. And as it comes down there, remove this slowly, and that will give you a nice clean edge finish. As you come to this corner, don't continue this way. What you want to do is just nick it down there, because we still need to work on this front section here. So now I'm just going to move the camera now. Zoom in a bit if I can. Okay. So now you've got a clean edge there. What you can follow through with is just by pressing it down with your red tucking tool. I'm using a blue one, red one, it doesn't really matter. And just pressing the film in there to get a nice clean edge. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and pop this one out by pushing in there. And as you can see, there's a little bit of wood grain as to where you can push and lock it all into place. And again, this is the importance when cleaning. You really want to make sure that that's all clean up there. Otherwise, it's just going to start pulling back and it's not going to want to stick. Okay, so you've got your excess. What we're going to do is just slight tension top and bottom to get a flat edge there. So we're just going to pull it a little bit more. There we go. And then press down. So once that's pressed there, leave it for a couple of minutes. We'll come back to it. What we're going to focus on is this back edge here. So we're going to work on that excess. By doing so, what we're going to do is we're going to grab obviously the fresh tip that we had before. We're going to fresh sort of blade section. Just grab the film from one end, and then you're just going to find the edge, push it down a little bit, and just cut it flush. And when you get out to the bottom, just follow the curve a little bit all the way round, and then when you reach the top, just slice the top there. So having a fresh blade, important again, it just removes all the unnecessary sort of pressure that you're going to apply to the film, and it's just going to do all the work for you, so it's just going to cut through like butter. And once that's done, you just pull that off, and that should be good to go. Throw that away, put it in the bin, and you should have a nice clean edge on this back side here. Okay, so when I try to flick it up, it's not flicking up any of the vinyl, it's sitting nice and flush, and because there's no tension here whilst we relaxed it coming to this corner, it's not going to pull back. Okay, so now we're moving back to this front piece here. As you can see, sitting for not even 2 minutes, it's pulling back a little bit. So what you're going to do is grab your heat gun, and then you're going to heat this area. Be mindful that the heat gun that you're using, if it's a Nosito heat gun, it doesn't have a temperature gauge on it. So essentially what it's going to do is burst out in probably 600 degrees. Please be very mindful when using heat guns on the interior. You do not want to touch the dash pieces. If you burn any of this section, that's a whole dash replacement, because what happens here, there's an actual airbag cover that sits around here. So in the event of an accident, that will pop open, the airbag will come out. Now, if you need to replace it, a lot of dash repair people try not to add any sort of fillers or anything in here, because what that acts as in an accident is shrapnel. So be very mindful when using heat guns. Always place it in one spot, or have something outside of the car where you can place the heat gun safely. So I'm going to go grab a heat gun, set all that up, and then I'll be back. So when you're using your heat gun, I'm using a Bosch heat gun because I have a lot of different services with a lot of different materials that require different temperatures. So my temperature gauge here is on the back and I can set that. Azito ones work fine, but just got to be mindful that if this touches anything to touch, it will burn you, it will burn the dash, it will damage anything. So essentially I've set mine to 450 degrees, just on the back there. I'm going to give a little bit of heat and sort of fan it around a little bit and see what the film does. Okay, by heating it up a little bit, what it does is activates the adhesive and the film tries to relax in that section. So we'll just push it down a little bit again. And now I know that's not going to go anywhere. So we'll put our heat gun down in a safe spot. Fresh blade. Again, what we're going to do is flush cut the bottom section. So we'll go to the bottom here and just flush cut all the way through. Just to clean up that bottom bit. Now what you want to do is where this curve sort of sits, we'll start about a quarter of the way down, bring it up and around that curve and then up on a 45. So that way when you're putting it back in, it's not going to bunch up or catch on anything. And from this quarter of the way down, you're just going to go 45-degree angle, cut across, and then give yourself at least probably, a couple mil from the edge and just cut down. But again, fresh blade, it just takes any unnecessary sort of sawing at this film, it just cuts nice and easy. Okay, and with that edge, you're just going to roll it over. That way it has something to grab. And with this top section here, what we're going to do is just fix this up a little bit. So right from that point, you're just going to go there, straight up. Okay, bring this towards you, so you can tuck this back section in, and then, make sure it sits down, and then just fold this one over. So what you might find is the reason why we're adding a little bit of extra around the edges, this is a demister vent, so when you've got your heater set on in the morning or trying to do other things to get warm, it targets this section. So adding the extra unwanted heat here, if it's not set down properly, over time it might pull apart right from these edges if it's all flush cut. So this is why we just wrap around these edges, and we'll just push everything down, make sure everything's sitting nice and flush, and then pop it back in. So whilst you pop it back in, what you'll notice is this point has come up and that point has come up. So that's fine. All you have to do is just wedge your tucking tool there, top and bottom, just to clean up that corner. And that's the installation for the dash piece. Again, things to note is you don't want vertical lines, so you want to add a little bit of sort of tension there as you guide it across. Follow this top line here because that'll give you the extra couple of millimeters that you need to be able to sort of rest it in there and push it, whilst if you've ordered a textured film, give you the nice pattern across there. With that added excess that you're going to get in your kits, should have enough to cover the bottom. So what you're going to do after you've done that is just flick it up and remember to go on a 45-degree angle and just get it sitting nicely. Also to recap, snap off a fresh blade so you get a fresh tip on the end that you'll just put on a 45-degree angle again and just let the blade do the work. Textured films, they are a little bit thinner than the ones that we usually use, but still got the same quality and durability. It's just easier to handle. And to finalize, once you're sort of happy with everything and it's sitting nicely, what I like to do as well is just get the heat gun and really fan it around the area. Do not focus in one spot, because what you're going to do is run the risk of burning this top section. So just fan it across to get any air bubbles that may have been trapped, and to sort of see what the film's doing. So if the film's pulling back in a section, you'll be able to address it. After you've heated it, just let it sit and relax for about 30 seconds. If I go ahead and push this too quickly, what's going to happen, it might leave a fingerprint mark, or I might actually press this too hard and leave an imprint on the dash. So just let it cool down after you've heated it, and then just give it a nice good press, and then go over it again, top edge, get that nicely pressed down, and then bottom edge, and follow that through. And there you have it. There's one dash piece to go. Now this is the trickier piece on the car, but essentially this tutorial will help sort of understand you don't need to remove this piece to get it on nicely. This is a satin black, so it's a lot thicker and harder to work with. So you'll find that the texture materials actually work a little bit easier, but just obviously remember the points, follow and guide the top section here, and then colour in pushing down. Stay away from the outdoors and obviously the surface cool to touch and clean. Make sure the surface is prepped properly underneath, inside and out, all the way around, and then you shouldn't have any issues. And again guys, you've got two of these pieces and two of the other smaller pieces on the dash included in your kits, so if you do stuff one up, then you've got the spare there as well. Alrighty, so the next step, what you're going to do is, just as we did on the longer side, you're going to do the same sort of process on this shorter side, so making sure that we're cleaning up on the top edge and the bottom edge with your either red or blue tucking tool, making sure you get the microfiber in there and sort of remove all the contaminants from up top there. Make sure that you can focus on in here as well, as a lot of dirt and grime gets sort of built up in these areas. After that, what you're going to do is just push, and that should sort of pop out to allow accessibility around here, and cleaning up around these back edges, and don't forget to clean up in here. So once we've done that, we're just going to pop it back down. Okay, that's all clean, that's been ready to sort of go. You're going to take your pre-cut piece like this. You're going to do a little sort of fold so you can get up into that corner. It's a little bit tricky. And making sure there's no wood grain piece. So this is probably one of the hardest pieces to do in the kit. So please be patient. And you want to aim for that top line again. So you want to follow through with a little bit of tension on the end here, and then following it through. It doesn't matter if it falls back down a little bit, you've still got all that coverage. So we're going to colour it in again. So from top to bottom, just slowly working our way down. Until it lays relatively flat. Alright. Now with our tucking tool, what we're going to do is just lightly press the film in here. Don't press too hard, because what might happen as well, you might cut through the film. There's a little pocket where this sort of slides in. So you just want to lay it flat there to get a rough outline. And then just work on tucking the top section in. So you can tuck the top section in now, that's perfectly fine. Just to there. Okay, so now all we have to focus on here is cutting this section out, cutting the bottom just like we did on the other side, and then finishing off this rounded area. So first we're just going to get that nice 45-degree angle straight line so we can cut. Remember again, fresh blade, fresh tip. It just, no need to add pressure. I'll put my fingers back here so there's no pressure at all. I'm just going to pop the blade through and then guide. Okay, once that's done, what we're going to do is peel that back a little bit. Then you'll have a nice easy surface. So once you've pulled the bottom section off, what you can do is just tuck that in a little bit more, give you a straighter sort of edge. Fresh tip on the knife as well. So we're not going to cut in right on the line, because that means we're going to cut it short. So what we need to do is just cut on this little plastic cluster just to the left, a couple of millimeters, and straight down. By giving yourself that extra couple of millimeters, what we're going to do now is pull this back a little bit, and we'll be able to tuck this in there. So I'm going to pull back, and the tucking tool will go behind there, tuck everything in nice and neat, as you can see. And if you're sort of having trouble, there's another end you can use on your tucking tool, just to sort of smooth everything out and get it all placed nicely. Alright, so now we're going to do this curve section as well. So you're going to have your heat gun ready as also. So we're going to pull it out, but as you can see, it's nice and easily pressed up on top there. So we're going to just follow the same technique as we did on the other side. Don't have to pull too hard, just get the rough shape where it sort of evens out and there's not too many wrinkles. Just like that. We'll press that down, let it sit for a couple of minutes. It relaxes into the shape and we don't need to do much more. I'm going to go grab the heat gun, so while that sits. So while that's been sitting, we're just going to press it down, heat it up a little bit. Remember, always fanning your heat gun. Press down. That should sit nicely. So we'll let that cool down now, because if you cut on warm vinyl, what it's going to do, it's just going to cause jagged edges, and it's always going to catch, and it's going to blunt your blade very quick. So that's nice and cool now. What we're going to do is just a quarter of the way down again. Going to follow it up. So just get that started. So around the curve, flush cut until you come to a 45-degree angle and finish that off. Do a slit right here, fold the front back, and then roll that one over. Alrighty, and come down on the quarter section and go 45 down, and then just a couple of mil from the edge, cut it down. That way we can fold this one over, because again, the mister is always going to be hitting these sort of areas. And just the bottom here, we're just going to flush cut that away. So I didn't give myself too much, so I have to do a jagged motion. Alright, what happens here now is just make sure it's nice, sitting nicely. You can give it one more touch of heat if you want to. Just make sure nothing's pulling up. So you're not adding too much tension, you're just guiding it across and making sure that little contour line on the top is nice and straight. And then we'll just place it back there. And just to top it off, we'll just tucking tool right on this corner, neaten that bit, and then just on the bottom corner as well. And as you lift this out, this is obviously going to push on the cluster piece, so you just have to make sure that's all tucked in. So now that's all done, we're just going to give it a final heat. Make sure it sits nicely. Remember, fan it around. You've got a bunch of plastics, you've got your leather here, you don't really want to be burning anything. So bringing it back and forward, back and forward. As you've laid it relatively flat, the film is not going to start pulling back on you or stretching too much. So that's pretty hot right there. That's all I needed to do. I left it for a couple of seconds and I'm avoiding touching or pressing down on these leather pieces here. So I'm really focusing just on pressing down the film, making sure there's no air bubbles, nothing's pulling back on me here. And I want to avoid pressing or touching that when it's hot, because that will distort. And there you go, that's the other small dash piece.